So the reason that sin feels so powerful in your life and your temptations are running rampant in your brain every single day and you keep almost falling into them is because you don't understand what true sin is. Sinful actions is just a symptom of a deeper root issue. The root issue is the identity. Sin is not an action, it's an identity. So when we see that we were shapen in iniquity, Psalm 51, Romans 5:12, through one man sin entered the world and death passed on to all. We can now see that our struggle with all these sins, falling into the lust, getting angry, murdering people, all these things we see is just a byproduct of our nature. When we sin, we don't become more sinners. We sin because we already are sinners. And this is why Jesus came, not only to die for our sins, but to make us new and make us alive in God and crucify our flesh that was a part of the sinful nature. Because when the flesh is crucified and you understand that you're not living in that anymore, just trying harder to do better, that's actually completely dead. And you align yourself and identify yourself with who God says you are, and that's righteous, perfected, and made new. Now the source has changed, and you're going to be able to produce different things in your life, fruitful things in your life, because you're not forcing it, but because it is the truth now. Just like the sinful nature produced sinful actions, the righteous nature is going to produce righteous action. Because in Romans 6:14, it says that sin has no dominion over us. We are slaves to righteousness. Before we were slaves to sin. So it didn't matter how hard we tried before, we were always enslaved to the sinful nature. We didn't have a choice. But now we are slaves to righteousness. So now we can understand that sin has no power in our life. So we don't have to focus on the sin because the sin has been defeated. We need to focus on the cross. We need to focus on who God declares that we are. Because the more you focus on, I'm a sinner trying to get better, you're still assuming the identity of a slave to sin instead of assuming the identity of a slave to righteousness. So this is why you're able to white knuckle it and try super hard for a couple of weeks, but then you always fall back into the sin because the source was never changed. And this is why in John 3:5, it says that we have to be reborn. Before you thought sin was just about actions, but now that you see, it doesn't matter if you stopped sinning or didn't stop sinning, you never would have been able to change your identity because you were born into it. But like we said, when you're reborn into the Spirit, you receive that new identity that's a seed of God. And it says in 1 John 3 that when you are born of God, you cannot sin. Positionally, why? Because Christ can't sin and he's living in us. So the identity, the sinful identity is fixed and we are no longer sinners, we are righteous. But now the reason we fall still and we mess up still in spiritual life when we're saved is because we forget who we already are. This is the second part of sin. John 16:9, of sin because they believe not unto me. So us refusing who God says we are, and that's righteous, washed, sanctified, sealed, holy, all of these things created to do good works because we're attached to the vine, we're attached to Christ. Us refusing that and trying to do it ourselves is why we keep falling into the sin, because we're sinners, an apple tree trying to produce mangoes. But if we would just accept that we are a good tree now and we're going to produce good works as a byproduct, that's when sin will start to lose its grip and will actually start to produce good works. So it's okay to struggle though. Why? Because the flesh and the spirit are in conflict. It's actually proof that you're saved, because now the spirit is fighting against the flesh and the flesh is fighting against the spirit. So we don't have to worry about the sinful actions on the outside. We need to worry about who we're identifying with. And the more that we identify with who we truly are, the more sin is going to lose its grip, like we've said 3 times. But now that you understand this, the struggle is actually showing that the spirit is working inside of you, and you just have to align with that, and you'll get better and better at that over time. So, this shift really needs guidance though, because your mind's going to fight. We've been trained our whole lives to trust our thoughts, trust our emotions, trust what we see. So this takes a long period of time to get better at distrusting your thoughts and aligning yourself with who God